My friend Jake always laughed at ghost stories. But after he moved into his late aunt's apartment, everything changed. Everything was fine for the first few days, until he heard a voice in the ventilation. Not a whisper, but a clear, mechanical one, checking the microphone. The 12G test. Jake thought it was an IT guy's joke. But after a week, his laptop turned on itself at night. There is a black background with white letters on the screen. You chose the wrong apartment. A red light flashed in the camera, even though he had never connected it. He called me and Sarah. We found a trapdoor in the wall behind an old cabinet. Inside are wires, cameras, and a unit with the Silent Watch Incorporated logo. My aunt's diary was lying on the floor. They're watching. Don't trust your neighbors. We decided to dig deeper. Sarah, who understands electronics, found a hard drive in the unit. The video files showed how the previous tenants of the apartment disappeared one by one. The recordings show people in black jumpsuits entering at night through a hidden door in the basement. It's a surveillance system, Sarah said. They are testing new technologies. Jake's aunt must have found out something. But the next day, Sarah was hit by a car. The doctors said it was an accident, but her phone was gone. We found it smashed near the hatch. On the screen is the last message: they are using ultrasound. Don't listen to the voice. Jake started hearing them every night. Voices that knew his thoughts. You told your friend. A mistake. He tore the wires, but the sound came from the walls. We found the key to the basement in my aunt's diary. There's a room with seatbelt chairs and screens broadcasting our social media. Our medical records were on the table, marked candidates for Phase 3. It's not paranormal, I whispered. This is an experiment. They study how fear breaks the psyche. After Sarah's death, Jake and I completely lost our footing. She was buried last Saturday. At the funeral, some guy in a black suit left an envelope in my car. Inside is a printout of correspondence from Sarah's messengers. The last message, sent a minute before the impact: they know about the basement. Leave now. The addressee is an unknown number. Jake tried to call, but the phone was picked up and there was silence. We finally went down to the basement at night, armed with spray cans and flashlights. Jake was shaking like he had a fever. It wasn't fear that was shaking him. He could hear them even during the day. Voices through ventilation: you won't save them. We've already rewrote your files. The room with chairs turned out to be a laboratory. Sarah is right, ultrasonic radiators were tested here. Protocols were scattered on the table, frequencies causing panic, insomnia, hallucinations. A box of VR glasses was found in the corner. Jake put them on, and the screen blinked, showing footage of his childhood that hadn't been there. A trip to Disneyland. But he's never been there. This is neurofeedback, I read in the documents. They're implanting false memories to erase the real ones. We found Jake's aunt. Or rather, what's left of it. There was a glass capsule in the next room, like in the movies about suspended animation. She was alive. Eyes open, lips whispering, don't trust your neighbors. He has a tattoo of 12G on his arm. Jake broke the glass, but her body went limp like a rag. The doctors later said, prolonged coma. The next day, the plumber came. A guy with a toolbox, but without a badge. It's time for you to replace the pipes, he smiled too broadly. The old ones. They're leaking. I closed the door, but an hour later I saw him in the courtyard. He was photographing our house. Jake ran out with a baseball bat, but the man disappeared in a black van with no license plates. In the evening, a notification popped up on the phone: Silent Watch has been updated. The family mode feature is enabled. The gallery is filled with our old photos. Only in all the pictures, instead of Sarah, there is an unknown girl with her hairstyle. Jake began to sob. They're washing it. So that we forget. We went to the Silent Watch office, and found the address in my aunt's old contracts. The building turned out to be an abandoned warehouse. There is a sign at the entrance that says, "Beware of asbestos." There is nothing inside, except for one room with servers. The screen was on, "Welcome, Jacob." "It's a trap." I pulled him toward the exit, but the doors slammed shut. A voice from the speakers. "You violated the protocol. We are starting the correction." Jake fell, clutching his head. That blood-curdling ultrasound screech came out of the vent. I dragged him to the emergency exit, barely able to stand on my own. 3 weeks have passed since then. Jake's at the clinic. Doctors say it's an acute psychotic disorder. But I saw his notes, patient 12G. The reaction to the test signal is positive. A neighbor came up to me yesterday. The sweet old lady who always treated us to pies. "You don't want to end up like your friend, do you?" She shoved the bag at me. Inside is a photo of me from work, my girlfriend, and my parents in another city. Sometimes it's better to keep quiet. I burned everything I found in the basement. But the voices are already inside my walls. At night, the laptop screen turns on by itself. There. After the neighbor's visit, I stopped sleeping. Every creak of the van outside the window made my heart beat like crazy. I woke up last night to the smell of burning. Someone had set fire to the trash cans by the garage. The cameras show a man in a black hoodie, his face hidden. But I recognized the gate, the same plumber. I went to Jake's clinic. His room is on the 3rd floor, the windows are barred. The nurse said he was transferred to an isolation unit after trying to hurt himself. But when I got to the door, I heard his screams. "Turn them off. Turn it off." Through the peephole, he saw 2 paramedics holding him while the doctor injected something into a vein. There is a Silent Watch logo on the doctor's coat. At home, I hacked into Jake's email. The last letter from the patient care service: "Your friend is resistant to therapy. We recommend extending the course." Attachments are audio files. I turned on one, and he froze. They were the same voices from the ventilation, but amplified tenfold. The words overlapped like mantras: "No one needs you. Give up. They will win." I found a box under the table that I hadn't unpacked since moving in. Inside is an old album by Jake's aunt. Photo of the 90s, she is at a rally with a poster, "Stop Silent Watch." On the back is a newspaper note: "Activist accuses corporation of sound torture." There is no proof. Suddenly, the phone screen flashed. Notification from an unknown number: "Do you want the truth? Wait for the signal." An hour later, there was a knock on the door. The courier handed over an envelope without a stamp. Inside is a USB flash drive and a key card labeled "Server 4." There is a video on the flash drive, the Silent Watch meeting. A man in a suit who looks like my boss says, "Phase 3 is over. 97% of the subjects demonstrate loyalty after correction." My company's logo is in the corner of the screen. I've been working there for 5 years. I was called to the office this morning. The boss was smiling like a boa constrictor. "You look tired. Maybe take a vacation?" His fingers tapped on the folder with my name on it. Inside is a photo of me at Jake's clinic. I came out as if I was calm. But I was shaking so much in the car that I barely put the key in the lock. The same frequency started playing on the radio, a hissing squeal. I tore out the wires, but the sound was coming from the speakers of the car. A girl was waiting at home. "Liza. We've been dating for 6 months." She hugged me, but her hands were as cold as a corpse's. "You haven't called in a long time." I was worried. Her voice sounded like Sarah's. The same timbre, intonation. She didn't know Sarah. While she was sleeping, I checked her phone. The last call is the Silent Watch number. The notes contain a list of my habits: coffee with 2 sugars. Afraid of heights. He trusts Lisa. I went outside, panting. My phone was ringing in my pocket. Unknown number. I replied. Congratulations, you passed the selection, the voice processed by the disguiser. Silent Watch offers a contract. If you keep silent, you get immunity. No, Lisa will become the 13B test. I threw the phone on the asphalt, crushing it under my heel. Lisa came out on the porch, sleepy, in my sweater. Who called? What is it? She asked too innocently. Telemarketing, I lied, kissing her on the forehead. Her skin smelled of someone else's perfume. In the afternoon, while she was in the shower, I searched her bag. Under the lining is a dictaphone the size of a credit card. Recordings of our conversations, laughter, even quiet nightmares. There is an engraving on the case, SW13B. In the office, my colleagues were whispering as I passed. There was an envelope on the table, urgent, moving to the branch. The details are in the letter. Inside is a one-way ticket to a city that is not on the map. The coordinates led to the desert. Lisa disappeared in the evening. She left a note, I'm sorry. They promised not to touch you if I report back. She attached a flash drive with a video. Her mother is in the hospital, connected to the device, and a voice, over, erase the data, she will die. I went to Jake's place. His room is empty. The nurse said, I checked out. He left with his relatives. But Jake was an orphan. I found my aunt's old laptop in the garage. In the destroy folder, there are drawings of an ultrasound dampening device, diagrams and lists of parts from radio stores, and the coordinates of the hangar outside the city where she kept the prototype. I built the device overnight. The battery lasted for an hour. I checked on myself. The voices in the walls had stopped. For the first time in a month, I heard silence. I found a magazine in my aunt's hangar. She tested the device on herself. Last entry, they replaced Mark. My husband is their agent now. Run if you find it. Mark is her husband, who died a year before her death. I found his photo in the Silent Watch database, Agent 34E. Status, active. When I returned, I found Lisa at home. She was packing, her face set in stone. You should have given up. She tossed me a flash drive with a video of my parents sleeping in their bedroom. The camera was installed today. Why are you with them? I asked, holding the device behind my back. They gave Mom medicine. She's in remission, her voice cracked. And you? You're just data. I turned on the device. Her face contorted as she clutched her ears, screaming. A syringe with a blue liquid fell out of her purse. Stop it. She was crawling towards the exit. They're in your head. You already. I turned off the device. She ran away. Her phone was left on the floor. The last call is at 3:14 a.m. The number matched my boss. I'm sitting in the garage right now. My aunt's device is buzzing, overheating. On the table is Lisa's syringe, a data flash drive, and a pistol I've never bought. My aunt's device overheated after 2 hours. I took it apart, trying to figure out how it works. Inside is a homemade board with a chip marked experimental. Not for mass production. I found her notes in the garage. It turns out that she stole a prototype from the Silent Watch lab, where she worked as an engineer before being fired. Lisa didn't come back. A letter arrived instead. You killed her mother. Watch this. Attachment, video, an elderly woman in a hospital room, twitching in convulsions. Voiceover, your father is next. I called my dad. He answered from someone else's number. Son, we have guests. They say you stole something. He was interrupted, the phone was hung up. I found the key to the safe in the desk drawer, which I had forgotten about. My aunt left it to me as a legacy. There's a folder with names in the safe. My name was number 45F. The registration date is my birthday. I found a medical card. In the column, complications during childbirth, hypoxia. The risk of neurological abnormalities. The postscript is in red, candidate for observation. I was chosen even before I took my first breath. In the evening, Mark, my aunt's deceased husband, knocked on the door. He looked to be in his 40s, although he should have been in his late 70s. She ruined our best project, he threw a photo on the table. My aunt is bedridden in the same clinic where Jake was. Return the chip, and we'll get you out of the system. You will become nothing. Free. And Jake? Lisa? I asked, hiding my knife hand behind my back. Data, he smiled. They have already been overwritten. I hit him. The knife entered the neck, but there was no blood. Wires crawled out of the incision. Mark laughed a mechanical laugh. Did you think we were still human? His face fell apart like a mask. Underneath it is a metal skull with cameras instead of eyes. I ran outside, but the Silent Watch van was already waiting. I'm writing this in a truck with barred windows. My escort is Lisa. Her left arm is now like Mark's, steel under artificial leather. They improved me, she says, staring at nothing. Pain is not necessary. Fear is a mistake. I have my aunt's chip in my pocket. If you crush it, according to her notes, it will trigger an EMP pulse. Destroy all their systems within a mile radius. And me too. Lisa took out her gun. Give me the chip. Or I'll erase your parents as unnecessary files. A tattoo glimmers on her neck, 13B. The same one that Sarah had. The truck's engine roared, drowning out the roar of blood in his ears. Lisa pointed the gun at my chest. Her hand wasn't shaking. The artificial tendons under his skin tightened with a soft buzz. 3 seconds, she said. His eyes remained dead, like those of a fish on ice. I squeezed the chip in my pocket. My aunt wrote that the pulse would disable everything within a kilometer radius. But how? There was no activation pattern in her notes, just a warning, only as a last resort. They made you a car, I hissed, trying to see Lisa's footprints in it. The one who laughed at my jokes about robots. I'm better than I was, she bent down, and the headlights picked out a scar on her neck, stitches made of metal threads. The pain is gone. Fear too. The truck turned sharply onto a dirt road. A building with towers loomed in the distance, the Silent Watch data center. A chip was being transported there. My parents probably went there too. Do you remember how we met? I asked, buying time. In the cafe. You spilled a latte on my keyboard. Her finger twitched on the trigger. Just a millimeter. This. Not me, for the first time, her voice faltered. They erased it. I jerked my arm forward, throwing the chip under the seat. She fired, the bullet burned through the door. We grappled, her steel fingers digging into my throat. The air was blocked, but I managed to grab the chip and hit her temple with it. Sparks. She froze, twitching like a broken android. His eyes rolled back, and smoke poured out of his mouth. The truck drove out onto the field. I fell out, the chip in my bloody palm. The building of the center was half a kilometer away. The vans were chasing me. There was a micro USB in the chip. I plugged it into my phone. There is one button on the screen, activate. I called my father. The robot replied. Your call is important to us. Wait for it. He pressed the button. Nothing at first. Then the ground shook. A fireball burst out of the Silent Watch building. The windows of the trucks cracked, the engine stalled. My phone melted in my hand. I ran towards the ruins. Everything in the data center was destroyed. But I found a room with servers among the rubble. There are people on the floor. Not cars. Technicians with burns, guards with fractures, and children. In glass capsules, connected to wires. One boy opened his eyes. He has a tattoo of 07D on his arm. "Mom," he whispered, clinging to my hand. The boy was trembling, clutching my hand. His fingers were as cold as Lisa's. Groans could be heard from the broken capsules around. The children, real and alive, were trying to get out, tripping over the wires. The youngest looked to be about 6 years old. He had the same tattoo on his neck, 11A. We didn't mean to," the 07D boy whispered. "They said our parents had abandoned us." My heart sank. These children were not just used, they were taught that no one needed them. It's easier to break it that way. Suddenly, concrete crunched behind him. I turned around. A man in a burnt robe crawled out from under the rubble. His face was disfigured, but I recognized the boss. "You idiot," he wheezed, wiping the blood from his lips. "The system is being backed up, each 5 minutes." He collapsed, twitching in his death throes. But his words stuck in his brain. Silent Watch could recover. The children huddled around me, clinging to my torn jacket. The oldest, about 12 years old, pointed to a black trapdoor in the floor. "There are more people there. The ones who screamed at night." We went down the charred stairs. The basement was intact. Rows of glass cells with adults. There are masks with sensors on their faces. On the screen above each camera, overwrite, 87%. I saw her among them. My aunt. Alive. Her hands were chained to a chair with wires implanted in her temples. "Turn it off." The server, her voice sounded right in my head. The chip in my pocket got hot. "Otherwise they are." A crash from above interrupted her. The children screamed. They were coming down the stairs, people with mechanical limbs, charred but functional. Lisa led the way, her face half torn off, a titanium skull gleaming under her skin. "You won't get through," her voice creaked like unoiled gears. "We are eternal." Boy 07D suddenly rushed to the control panel. His small fingers tapped on the keys. "Mom taught me." "Stop it," he shouted. "I'll crack it." The screen flashed red, self-destruct activated. 314, 313. Lisa rushed to him, but I blocked the way. Her metal hand dug into my shoulder. The pain was fiery, real. "Run!" I shouted at the children. Through the tunnel. The aunt in the cell smiled. Her eyes said it all. I pulled the wires out of her temples, and she collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Boy 07D pulled the lever. The walls shook. Lisa froze, her processors overloaded. I grabbed the child and ran. The explosion threw us to the surface. The building collapsed, burying everything, agents, servers, the truth that I'm sitting in an abandoned barn with 5 children. I have a splinter from Lisa stuck in my shoulder. A purulent odor indicates that an infection has begun. Children sleep huddled together. 07D, whose name is Aiden, bandages my wound with a cloth. "Will they find us?" "What is it?" he asks. My aunt's chip burns in my pocket. On it, under a layer of smoke, a microscopic logo is visible: backup, all data. No, I lie. We're free. But at night I hear the drone of drones. And I know that Silent Watch is already rising from the ashes. This time it's with the lessons I've taught them. 3 months have passed. The wound on the splash had festered, but I hid it from the children. We hid in old farmhouses, stole food from abandoned shops. Aiden became my shadow, his eyes remembering the horror of the laboratory less and less. The other children started laughing and playing hide and seek among the ruins. Sometimes I almost believed that we had escaped. They haven't found the body yet. Little Lena, 7 years old, disappeared at night. She was found this morning by a stream. Not mutilated, not beaten. Simply, an empty one. Her eyes stared glassy at the sky, and she had a fresh tattoo on her arm, 01A. They're back, Aiden was shaking, squeezing my hand. They took her because you're sick. He was right. The pus from the wound smelled like metal. When I cut the skin with a knife, the wires flashed under it. That night, the drones came. Not black vans, but cars with laser scanners as quiet as owls. They hovered over the barn, projecting a message onto the wall. Welcome home, Sample 45F. It's time to update the firmware. The children were crying, begging me to stay. But I saw their marks, the tiny scars behind their ears. Chips implanted at birth. I came out with my hands up. A man in a black robe stepped out of the shadows. Not a robot, but a real one. His face was familiar to me. Dad? I exhaled, recognizing the features under the gray hair. He smiled as he took out a syringe filled with blue liquid. We are proud of you. You've proved that humanity is a glitch that can be fixed. The drones surrounded the children. They didn't run away. Their eyes became empty, like Lisa's that I was reprogrammed. Now I'm guarding the new data center. Aiden, Lena, the others, they're here. We call them Generation 2.0. They don't cry. They are not afraid. Sometimes, when the algorithms fail, I have dreams. Auntie, Lisa, the truck is on fire. Then the pain comes, an electric shock through a chip in the spine. A new kid came up to me today. He has a 45F2 tattoo on his arm. My eyes. My smile. Dad? He says. I stroke his head like I used to do with Lisa. It's all right. The scan begins. The final. Somewhere in the heart of the system, a timer is ticking. 3:14, 3:13, 3:12.